The War of the Spanish Succession was a conflict that lasted from 1701 to 1714 and involved most of the major powers of Europe. It was fought over the inheritance of the Spanish throne, which was left vacant upon the death of Charles II of Spain without an heir. The conflict was essentially a struggle between two coalitions: the Grand Alliance, led by Britain, the Dutch Republic and Austria, and the Bourbon Alliance, led by France and Spain. The conflict began with a series of complex diplomatic negotiations, as various European powers jostled for position in anticipation of Charles II's death. Ultimately, the two main claimants to the Spanish throne were Philip, Duke of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV of France, and Charles, Archduke of Austria, who was supported by the Grand Alliance. The war began in earnest in 1702, with a series of British and Dutch naval operations in the Mediterranean and Caribbean. The Grand Alliance was able to secure some early victories, including the capture of Gibraltar by an Anglo-Dutch force in 1704. However, the tide of the war began to turn in favor of the Bourbon Alliance after a series of French victories on the European continent. In 1709, the Battle of Malplaquet marked the high point of the war, with heavy casualties on both sides. The war continued for several more years, with sporadic fighting across Europe and the Americas. Ultimately, the conflict was resolved by the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which granted the Spanish throne to Philip, but with several important concessions to the Grand Alliance powers. The War of the Spanish Succession was one of the bloodiest and most significant conflicts of the early modern period. It had profound consequences for the balance of power in Europe, leading to the emergence of Britain as a dominant naval and commercial power, and marking the beginning of the decline of the Habsburg dynasty.